Welcome to this Our Finger Lakes History program. I am Seneca County Historian Walter Gable. Today's program is the second in an occasional series dealing with historic places in the Finger Lakes. In this occasional series, you will learn some detailed information about these historic places which are well worth your time visiting. Today's program deals with the historic Scythe Tree, located at 841 Waterloo, Geneva Road, between Waterloo and Geneva. Almost every city and village in New York State has a Civil War monument. These monuments serve as silent markers, paying respect to the many soldiers that lost their lives in the Civil War. While in most cases these monuments are made of stone and brass, an unusual Civil War monument is this Scythe Tree. Our story begins with James Wyman Johnson. At age 26 in 1861, when the Civil War broke out, he was the eldest of 4 children living on a farm west of the Waterloo village. In mid to later October 1861, an Army recruiter was traveling throughout the Western Finger Lakes region to get many young men to enlist in the Union Army. One night, probably October 25th, an Army recruiting meeting was held at the Vale School District House, the schoolhouse that the younger Johnson children attended. James and his father attended that evening recruiting member. One account of that recruiting meeting said that many hard-handed farmers and their sons gathered that night and listened with mixed emotions and drawn faces to the appeal of the recruiting agent. It must have been much like an old-fashioned revival. Clearly, it must have been an emotional gathering. I can envision that there was patriotic music being played and lots of American flags on display. Also speaking that night was the Reverend Samuel Gridley, the pastor of the Waterloo Presbyterian Church. Reverend Gridley argued that it was the patriotic duty of local young men to join the Union Army. The next morning, James Wyman Johnson was using his scythe to cut down weeds in an outlying field area. While he was working, it is easy to envision that in his mind were swirling thoughts about the Army recruiting meeting of the previous night. James realized that he had a patriotic duty, but he also realized that his help on the farm was very important to his family. He was torn between which of these two things was more important. When it was time for the midday meal called dinner in those years, James stopped working with his scythe, headed toward the farmhouse carrying his scythe. As would have been the usual practice at the time, he hung the scythe on a branch of the young tree near the kitchen door. While eating his meal, he told his parents that he had decided to enlist in the Union Army. He said that his scythe should be left in the tree until he returned home from his military service. At this time, we believe that young tree was about 8 inches in diameter. On October 29, 1861, Johnson enlisted in Company G of the 85th New York Volunteers. At the time of his enlistment, he was described as 5 feet 10 inches tall and slim, beardless, and blue-eyed. Shown at the top is a drawing of what the farmhouse was like and the small tree, but shown below is a recent picture of the actual farmhouse. James was taken prisoner in the fighting at New Bern, North Carolina in March 1862. James Wyman Johnson returned home on furlough in 1863, and his family members were shaken by how much he had aged in physical appearance. They felt he looked twice his age, and they saw in his face the harsh realities of his war experiences. He returned to the war after his furlough, and he was wounded in the upper thigh at Plymouth, North Carolina on April 20th, 1864. Realizing that he was likely to die, James gave his close friend, Lieutenant Edward Pearson, the reenlistment money that Johnson had earned. Tragically, Pearson was taken prisoner and went to Andersonville prison camp, and we don't know what happened to Johnson's reenlistment money that Pearson was supposed to get to Johnson's family. Frustrated about not knowing about the real status of Johnson, his sister wrote a letter. And from that response that comes back, we learn quite a bit about Johnson. The wounded Johnson was given medical treatment, but the Confederate surgeons were overworked and medical supplies were limited. Along with other severely wounded soldiers, Johnson was transferred to the Confederate hospital in Raleigh, North Carolina, where he died on May 22, 1864. Reading from the message that Johnson's family actually received regarding his death, I'll say, received a severe wound of the middle third of the right thigh, the ball lodging near the bone and fracturing the same. We remained at Plymouth till May 15th, when he was removed to Raleigh, North Carolina. The journey was a very severe one, which so exhausted him that at 6 o'clock on the morning of the 22nd of May, he breathed his last. He was conscious until within a few minutes of his death. The surgeon says, "I dressed his wound from the day he received his injury to the day of his death. I never once heard him complain. He was conscious of his danger and wished me to inform his friends of his fate. This was the only request he made. As he never seemed willing to converse during his sickness, I did not extract anything further from him. The rebel surgeons, I must say, were very kind and did all they could." Johnson is dead. The family is devastated. The scythe was left in the tree. The tree continued to grow, eventually measuring 100 feet in height and over 5 feet in diameter. The wooden parts of Johnson's scythe rotted away, and the tree grew around the scythe blade to where only the tip of the blade is visible today. The so-called Scythe Tree had gained fame over the years because of the true story of James Wyman Johnson. But its fame became even greater as a result of what happened in World War I. At that time, the Schaefer family was living on the farm, and 2 Schaefer boys enlisted in United States forces during World War I. They ceremoniously each hung scythe in the tree as they went off to war. So there were 3 scythes hanging in the tree during World War I years. And there were 3 U.S. flags ceremoniously waving as well. The 2 Schaefer boys came home from the war but left their scythes in the tree. The tree continued to grow, the wood of the scythes rotted away, and the tree grew around now the 2nd and 3rd blades. Shown here is a picture of Civil War veterans of Seneca County gathered at the Scythe Tree in the 1920s. This is a recent photograph of the Scythe Tree. You can see that it is very tall. In 1990, the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation named the Scythe Tree as one of 11 trees in New York State to be of extraordinary historic significance. The Scythe Tree is listed by the National Arbor Day Foundation as one of the majestic trees of America. This close-up shows how the tree is grown around one of the tips of a scythe blade. I hope you have enjoyed this short presentation on the famous Scythe Tree located at 841 Waterloo, Geneva Road. As you're driving by, you can easily pull over to the shoulder of the road and take a good look at this historic tree. The Scythe Tree is another piece in our Finger Lakes history.